Thankful for everyone being here this morning. We're having, as we know, weather outside, so it gets a little bit difficult for us to get here, but I'm happy to see the ones that could be here with us this morning. Those also at home or online with us somewhere, we thank you so much for tuning in also. You may be able to see, I guess, that we are in Exodus, the first chapter. We're going to start that study of that book today. But hope everybody got through the weather. I think basically what we had was thunder, lightning, and rain. I don't know. I didn't have many limbs out at the house on the ground, so hopefully the wind wasn't too bad. It must not have been too bad because I slept through most of it. It must mean I was tired. I don't know what it means. But anyway, we try to always cover a few things in our little news bulletin for each week. And we always want to remember our homebound members. And we have a little difficulty there this morning on one of our projectors, but we still have one of them working, and so that'd be fine. But anyway, we want to remember Brenda Baxter and Barbara Fields, Jenny Glenn, Pat Harbin, Joanne King, Brandon Ligon, Jean Odom, Darlene Pugh, Gracie Rushing, Marilyn Sanders, Peggy Skelton, Lavelle Stiers, Jimmy Sullivan, Dan Whitstone, Mildred Whitlock, James Whitson, and Fred Wick. So please let's remember all of those. As far as our activities, the Last Leaders groups, both the guys and the girls, will be going over some of their materials that they'll present at the convention later this month over Easter weekend. So we'll divide up again. The women, I guess, will be in room 23, and the guys will be in room 10 as far as I know. That's the case. So we'll remember that for tonight. Let's see. The Tanzania team, mission team, which is going to be leaving in June, I believe, will be, they're still meeting in Annex on Wednesday nights, and also collecting reading classes. If anyone would like to if you have an old pair, or if you would like to go somewhere and buy just some cheap reading glasses so they can carry them with them. The Easter egg hunt they were planning on doing today outside will now be in the building, and they want the children to meet in the foyer beforehand. On May the 4th will be a graduation banquet for our high school students, our seniors. A men's retreat will be May 16th and 17th with Jeremy Pate speaking Sunday, and he'll be speaking also at Sunday morning here in the auditorium. Prayer request, Lorraine Moore, mother of Nathan Moore, is rehabbing at Spain Rehab Facility in Birmingham. Pat Harbin is under hospice care at home. Tommy Holland, grandfather of Gracie Sperlin, is undergoing treatments. Kathy Mitchell, sister of Ron Mitchell, is receiving therapy at this time. Tim and Linda Nolan. Linda's doing better. Tim is still doing his treatments. Will Roberts, friend of the Orrs, is 13 years old, begun treatments for cancer. And so please remember him. Joanne Robertson, stepmother John Robertson, is awaiting surgery for a tumor that has not responded to therapy. Alan Williams, brother of Andy, is struggling with pulmonary hypertension still. Betty Barrentine has been moved to Forest Manor Rehab. She's in room 528. Melissa Wiggins is home after having a stent put in. Haley Keith, cousin of Hunter Collins, has been diagnosed with cancer. Devin Bedard, brother of Isaac Cornelius, cut hand with table saw. They were able to save the hand only on finger loss. And Patricia Tuggle, sister of Randy Watts, has been diagnosed with lymphoma. Didn't know that, Randy. Sorry to hear that. Hopefully treatments and stuff can get rid of that. Also, last Sunday, if you remember, was Mission Sunday, and so we didn't have our regular class. So I'd like to go over several dates from the 1st to the 11th, which would be next weekend, or close to it. On birthdays, Bo Burkhalter was on the 1st, the 2nd, David Williams, the 4th, Paul Michael Marlowe, the 5th, Evan Patterson, Peggy Sellers, Lacey Pugh, The 6th, Johnny Baxter. The 7th, Dawn Terry. The 8th, Rick Estes. The 10th, Hannah Grace. The 11th, Dana Kelly. So please let's remember those folks. There is a possibility of another mission trip this year to Americus, Georgia. Our church has been over there before. They want some to come over there and do a door knocking and a VBS on June the 26th and 29th. If you are interested in that. Well, let's have a prayer. Our Father in heaven, we come to you this time thanking you so much for all the blessings of life that you've given us. We thank you this morning, even though the rains have been excessive, we know that they are here to help us in so many ways. We thank you for that. We hope and pray that where there has been more rain than what we've had, that we know that some lives have been lost, but yet we pray that through your word, people can find comfort in times such as this. Father, we want you to be with us. As you noticed on our list this morning, we have those that are sick, rehabbing, and so forth like that, and finding out that they have issues. We pray, Father, that all the medicines and doctors' care that can be done to help each one of these people to regain the health they want to have. We just hope and pray that will happen. Pray that you'll be with us this morning through our class. Pray that you'll help us to look at Exodus and glean some things from it, and we hope it can help each of us in our daily lives. It's in your Son's name we pray. Amen. As you can see up there in Exodus 1, chapter 1, we have the beginning of the book of Exodus. This first verse number 1 that we have, from the beginning of Exodus back to Genesis, it's about 430 years of time that has happened, and we'll explain some more about that when we get over about the king that didn't remember Joseph and so forth like that. But we, again, sometimes, as we may not remember, is that we have one book of the Bible, and then we have the next one, and we can actually sit, read the end of one, and start reading the other one. Well, to us, they kind of all together, and just one right after the other, but we don't realize sometimes. We don't realize how long it was in the garden. At least I don't think man has figured out from, all the time that Adam and Eve was in the garden, and before they had a child and so forth like that, because we know that Adam lived over 900 years old, I believe it was. So time, Bible time, and our idea of it, maybe that may not be the best word in the world, but anyway, we have to realize that a lot of times it takes time to go from even one verse in the Bible to the next verse. And so sometimes that happens. So we see here that we have a time, because now this book is going to be devoted strictly to two main things. One is Moses and the exodus of the people out is one thing, about half of it. And the second half, or second part of it, is actually going to be a lot about the temple and the tent of meetings and so forth like that, and how to make it and all that kind of stuff. So we'll be looking at those things. But we have, and if you'll notice, we can look at Exodus this way. Exodus begins where the book of Genesis ends. And the book of Genesis probably tells us more about God, about man, about the beginnings and everything, than any other book in the Bible that could do that. And so you had a very information-heavy book known as Genesis, and now we're going to have one basically the same way, but it's a different area. Of the children of Israel who came to Egypt, who came with Jacob. Now, if you remember, at the last few chapters, or somewhere in there, maybe 4 or 5 chapters of Genesis, we see where, if you remember how Joseph got into power in the fact that he could interpret the dream or dreams that the Pharaoh had. And then he was put in charge of all the food supplies that could sustain the Egyptian people. He was in charge of all that. He rose to the second most important and powerful person in Egypt, is what it was. Well, he still had family and I don't know if he thought about it much then or not, still in Canaan, still near around Jerusalem and so forth, in areas such as that. And the famine, that 7 years of plenty had happened, and then the 7 years of famine happened as he interpreted the dreams. And so eventually the brothers came down. He saw who they were. They did not recognize him. And so overall, before it was over with, he was able, before the end of his life, he was able to have his father Jacob come to Egypt with his family. And so we see all that happening. So we see here in this first verse, it says now, it says here, of the children of Israel who came to Egypt, who came with Jacob, and it was each man in his household. Now we're going to find out a number here in just a moment in one of the questions. And but we we will see that it was basically the inner family, or close family of Jacob, are the ones that came, is what it was. Next question. Number 2, name Jacob's sons found in verses 2 through 4. Here they are. Reuben was one, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. Now, if you will notice right there, that list, and stop and think just a moment, there are 11 in that list, right? There's 11. How many males do we know of that Jacob had? 12. See, even at that time when Jacob was coming down, when he found out about Joseph, but anyway, for a long time, he did not think he had a 12th son. So I thought that was interesting in the fact that coming from the land of Canaan in that general area down, Jacob and 11 families. I guess you probably look at Jacob's family and the 11 families of the sons came down. And then because, if you notice, in verse 5 here, it says, and all the persons who came from the loins of Jacob, and we'll see that right here. Right here, if you notice up there, it says the number was 70. We're 70 in number, but Joseph was already in Egypt. Of course, we know he was. What had happened in Genesis was telling us. So I thought that was somewhat interesting to me anyway. But 70, now, please remember, and we'll see more about this well, let me just show you right here, this next one. After Joseph and his brothers died, the children of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly and grew in what way? In verses 6 and 7, it says, exceedingly mighty, so that the land was filled with them. Let's look just for a moment back in Genesis 47 and verse 27. This is one of the places where we read, it says, now, Israel lived in the land of Egypt in Goshen, and they acquired property in it and were fruitful and became very numerous. Now, if you notice this particular term, mighty with them, talking about how large they grew, but they grew in number. If you remember what was Abraham promised, Isaac and Jacob, what was all three of them promised? The very same thing. God promised each one of them that their family, their people, will become so numerous that they would be more than the stars in the sky. And believe me, they could see the stars, not like us. They knew how many stars was up there. If you ever get a chance in your life to go somewhere on this planet where the light pollution is 500, 600, 700 miles away, and wait for the darkness to come. There are so many stars, you cannot hardly separate one from another. They're just all over the place up there. And so they saw that and the fact, and also they will be more than the sand of the seas. And trust me, they lived near the Mediterranean Sea, just knowing what they knew about the sand. So many. So they were being that way. So when Joseph died, and several hundred years later, 400 years later, it was also that that this time span is happening, that they were, the children of Israel were increasing in number, is what they were doing. Now, and we'll see where that creates an issue here soon. Who arose that did not know Joseph? In verse 8 it says, a new king over Egypt. In verse 8 it says, now a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. Folks, how long does it take, usually, for someone to be forgotten by other people? You ever thought about that? Now, what I mean by that is this. Whenever the people that knew a person are gone, who's going to remember that first person? You understand what I mean? What I'm getting at is this. There were 70 people that came to Egypt, all right? During that time, though, Joseph, no doubt, was treated as almost as great as the Pharaoh. So there were people for many years that would known of Joseph. But what happens over 200 or 300 year period, the people that knew that, remember their years then were not 800, 900 years old. They were 100, 120, or 80, whatever it was. So their years, do you see what's happening? To where a king, which was the same thing as Pharaoh, that's who it was, could get to a point to where one of them don't remember it. Very likely, don't know this, but I would assume that there was probably some type of monuments or memorials or something or other put up around the country of Egypt for Joseph. Now, I don't know. I can't say that for sure, but you would kind of assume that. But even over time of that, what happens to statues and memorials and nice little things? They get grown up, they get torn down and trampled or whatever it might be. So you can hopefully see that it can get to a point to where someone does not, or the people as a whole, did not remember the greatness of what Joseph did for the country or the nation of Egypt. He saved the Egyptian people through God. God blessed that place and so forth like that. Now remember this. This Israelite nation started off in a place called Haran, Haran. And in that place, there was Jacob, Rachel, Leah, Zilpah, and Bilhah. There's five people there. Those 5 people were the ones that also was part of the 70, because the 2 women there, Rachel and Leah, were the ones, Rachel produced most. She had most of the sons. She didn't have all of them. Rachel only had 2. And so I may have said it wrong, but Leah had most of the sons of the 12. She had 10, and that would have put Rachel having 11. And if I'm not right, I'm going to find out soon because I see Bibles opening. So I know none of you have issues with memory. So I usually get in trouble when I try to go off and think on my own instead of what I wrote down. But anyway, in number 5, question number 5, this was a new king over Egypt. As the generations died that knew Joseph or knew of him, his respect, honor, and praise would wane as the new people would not know about him. You know, you take somebody that 200 years later from someone else and you start trying to remind them of that person or talk to them, they don't know who that is. And so we can see, and we need to know that because this is where we're fixing to see the mistreatment of the Israelite people come, is in this very short period of time right here. But anyway, this allowed for a king that did not respect God or Joseph to become to power, and that happened in this case. Next question. What did the king say to his people? The king, let's look at let's see. Yeah, in verse 9, the king that did not know Joseph said to his people, "Behold, the people of the sons of Israel are more and mightier than we." I know a lot of times, I don't know about you, but when you think of the area, the nation of Egypt, when it was, you would think nobody could take over them. But do you realize that eventually their empire was taken over by others? And so these things just tend to happen. And so we see that. Now, in this case, it says here, the king says to his people, you know, about they are mightier than we, and he was concerned. Now, you have to remember, they were in the land of Goshen, and we'll show you a map shortly and let you see where that area is. The first Pharaoh with Joseph gave them literally the best land. Well, there's only 70 people when they started. So I don't guess the Pharaoh thought that much about it. But as they stayed in that land over years and years and years and years, they multiplied, and even their animals, their herds and stuff got larger too. The Egyptians were also famous for their proud sense of racial superiority toward all the other people that was around them. In other words, other people basically had to bow down to them because the pharaohs looked upon as a god, as an idol god, and they a tremendous amount of idol worshiping they did in Egypt, and you can even see evidence of it today. So that's what he has here. So this is going to build up to something. In verse 10, what was the king worried about? In verse 10, it says this: "Come, let us deal wisely." Now, in my Bible, I don't know why I did this, but I underlined the word wisely and put a question mark above it. Because that's really not what they were going to do. "With them, lest they multiply, and in the event of war," as we can see up on the answer here, "that they also join themselves to those who hate us and fight against us and depart from the land." Now, stop and think just a moment. Before this king or Pharaoh thought this thought, how do you think the children of Israel thought about the Egyptians? Do you remember what happened? They were allowed to be, they would have all died, very likely, if they had stayed in Canaan. And they were brought down by Joseph. They were given the best land. The waters was plentiful. They had all you could ask for to raise animals and their food, and food for themselves. Do you really think they would think about trying to overthrow Egypt? I mean, really, if you stop and think about it. I wouldn't think they would. I would think they'd be happy and glad, and actually, I would think they'd help defend me. But also, since it took those hundreds of years to not remember Joseph. It may have been even the children of Israel got to the point where they didn't remember what that Pharaoh had done for them. They don't know. But anyway, he was concerned that they may fight against them. Also, let me mention something to you. I'm going to show you a map in just a moment. I put a little note up here because we're going to see the Hittite name here in just a moment. At the time, the Egyptians feared invasion from the Hittites from the north. If you will look right here, up here, Hatti is the land of the Hittites. And I'm going to show you another map in just a moment about how much land that they controlled. Now, if you stop and think a moment, after the flood and the three sons' families left, when they split, undoubtedly one of the branches winds up being making part of what this is known as a Hittite nation. And in man's time, sadly, it's usually like this. When you get enough people in your group and you feel that it's necessary for you to incorporate other property, other lands, then you start to see wars or invasions and stuff like that. It's been going on for ever since, I guess, we've been here, because remember, that king was worried that these people here were going to come down there. So let me show you this next little map. Here is the area that the Hittites controlled, all right in here. Now, by matter of fact, I don't know if that says Tarsus or not, but right in there, later in life, in time, is where Paul was from. So maybe his ancestors were of that nation there. But notice how they come down, but then Egypt controlled all this, and that stretched right up there. And we have in our world today in Korea, North, South Korea, we got a line, don't we? There's a line there where one of them's south and one of them's north. Here we have it states. Certain states make us south and certain other states make us north. It's what it does. But down here, the emperor or the king, the Pharaoh and the king was worried that these people up here were going to come down, and already there was many. I know it's been estimated, I guess between 1 and 3 million, maybe somewhere in that neighborhood, but it was a lot of people, a lot more than 70, that when Moses takes them out of Egypt, that there were a million of people and all. So in that country, there was enough people already of one group called the Israelites that could have been tied up with them and very likely could have taken over Egypt, is what it was. And so we see that. Now, I'd like to also mention to you this, on this question here, and when we're going to come up to this next one, but if you can, just remember that, and you can see probably why that Pharaoh thought what he did about they would join together with anybody coming in, and they would help take us over. And so even they had to worry about that too. What did the children of Israel build for Pharaoh? Now, if you notice that what happened, let's look just a moment. In verse 11, it says this, and this is the question we're looking at. So they appointed taskmasters over them to afflict them with hard labor, and they built for Pharaoh storage cities, Pithom and Ramses is what it was. And so what did the children do for Pharaoh, build for Pharaoh? Storage or supply cities. Now, the pyramids were built many years before. These people, the Israelites, had nothing to do with building the pyramids. It may have been 1,000 years or so beforehand. So we see that now. We have these two cities right here, Pithom and Ramses, and I'd like to show you right here. Right here is Ramses, and there's Pithom. And so now, if you notice where my little marker is, there's in light the word Goshen right there. Notice, if you would, the lay of the land. Do y'all know what rivers look like on a map? That's them little squiggly lines around. Well, notice, all back in here, there's one river. And starting right in here, they branch out. Now, there's a few of them over here going to Alexandria, but look, in the land of Goshen, all those branches, those rivers, that would have the nutrients of the Nile bring down, and it would go into their lands and fertilize and make their lands as luscious as they were. So we could see that. Again, God knew the place that they would need to be. And so here was in the land of Goshen. Now, where the Pharaoh was, I don't know if he was in a place called Memphis or wherever it might be, but anyway, these are two storage cities to store up goods and so forth like that. I don't know. It may have been also weapons and stuff. I don't know. But we can see that. Some Bible scholars estimate that the slavery period is that you'll see two dates. One of them is 284 years, and the other is 134 years. Now, either one of them, whenever that period ends, we see the likelihood of Moses Moses coming and doing what God wants him to do to get his people out of the land. But hopefully that'll let you see, here is, again, that city and that city, as we see in this verse, the verse we just read. And so they were doing that. Now, they not only built these two cities, but they also built memorials and things such like for them, for the Egyptian people. And I guess, seriously, then, what it did then, it probably turned the Israelite people against Pharaoh. Really. It just did the opposite of what he was hoping to do, probably. Who was appointed to afflict what? Taskmasters was appointed to inflict hard labor, found in verse 11, is what it was. I know, and I guess you have too. This, of course, is just a movie, but the Ten Commandments with Charlton Heston and all that. Well, when I think of the hard labor, I think of seeing on that movie to where there's men with whips hitting people and so forth. And there are a place or two in the Egyptian world where they have, a lot of times they may have a wall like this over here, and they will actually carve out in that wall a story, is what they will do. And there is a place, I forget the name right now, I read it yesterday, but I just don't remember it right now, was the fact that this shows in later time probably an example of the mistreatment of the Israelite people. There was a taskmaster with a whip in the wall, and in the time to hit the person and so forth like that. So that's what happened, and so it turned a nation of people that was in good shape as far as where they lived and raised and stuff like that into this. And it was all because of this king or Pharaoh that didn't know Joseph to think that these people were going to help others overtake them, so they made them prisoners, basically, in slave labor. Now, let's look in, can we see that about the storage? Okay. That's 14, okay. Let's go to our next one. The more the children of Israel were afflicted, what happened? It's a very unusual thing in the fact that the more that these people were afflicted, or that they were punished by the Egyptians, the more their nation grew, the more children they had, and so forth like that. And so this was actually a purpose for God to use these people, his people, as an example, and then what Pharaoh tried to do and so forth, that God, when Moses wanted the people to leave, and all those things, that the people would know that God delivered them out of that area. Next question. The more they multiplied, the more they spread out. And the Egyptians compelled the sons of Israel to labor rigorously. And what? They made their lives bitter with hard labor in mortar and bricks and in all kinds, should be kinds of labor in the field. I thought I had looked over that. Then if in this book, if you notice here, the phrase mortar and bricks, mortars and bricks, that the mortar and the bricks are going to play a very important part in this story of them leaving Egypt. It's what they're going to be. In verse 7 of Exodus 5, it says, "You are no longer to give the people straw to make brick as previously. Let them go and gather straw for themselves." You know, they were told that the supplies was given to the Israelites, and then they made the brick to build the cities and so forth. But now they had to go out and get their own, is what it was. Also, in verse 18 of that same chapter, "So go now and work, for you shall be given no straw, yet you must deliver the quota of bricks." And so again, seeing more and more harshness being the treating of these people. What were the names of the midwives of the king of Egypt spoke to in verse 16? Let's do a little bit of reading before we get there. Let's look in 15. "Then the king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Zephar, and the other was named Puah. And he said," and this is going to be in this question, this is the midwives. Folks, again, there were many Israelite people in Goshen, and they were having children. And so midwives, which has been a practice around in man's time for almost all the time. And so they would have midwives to help deliver the children, deliver the babies. But the king in verse 16 says this, and when you are helping the Hebrew women, and here's the two names of the women. When you are helping the Hebrew women to give birth and see them upon the birth stool, if it is a son, then you shall put him to death. But if it is a daughter, then she shall live. In that verse, if you're looking at it right now, why would that king or Pharaoh say that to kill all the males? Why would he say that? It's this. He was already worried about the male men of Israel and their ability to fight with someone else to take over his nation. And so by his idea, I believe, was if I can stop the males from growing up and being potentials against me, then I will be able to beat down anybody that tries to take me over. So he told them to take the males and to kill them. Now, there's only two names here. Bible scholars, if you read much about this, there's no doubt that there were, who knows how many midwives there were in Egypt of the Egyptian people. The Egyptian women were the midwives. And so this is just an example of two, and I think you'll see why that's the case here. So now we have, okay, somehow or another, I lost a question. Hang on. I think that's it right there. What did he say to them? And this is where he said that you kill the males and let the females live. Sorry, I messed that up right there. Excuse me. Question 14, "But the midwives feared God and did what?" In verse 17, what did they do? Did not do as the king of Egypt had commanded them, but let the boys live. is what they did. And the reason for that is the fact that they feared, as you know, they would have feared Pharaoh, knowing that they could lose their lives. But you know who they feared the most, or respected the most, or honored the most? God. And so undoubtedly, even the Israelite people living in that country of Egypt had a religious influence upon the Egyptian people, some of them. So we'll start there and finish this. It's just a few more slides after then. We'll finish this and go into chapter 2 next. Thank you very much.